The doctor looked at me across that cold examination table and said the word no man wants to hear twice in one lifetime. I watched his mouth move, but the sound came late, like thunder chasing lightning, and all I could think was that my wife had been sitting in a chair just like this one, 7 years earlier, hearing the same word from a different doctor in a different town. That was the moment everything split open again. But to understand how I ended up in that chair, how my own son turned his back while my daughter emptied her last dollar to keep me alive, I need to take you back. Back to a life that looked simple from the outside but carried weight nobody ever saw. My name is Robert Whitfield. I'm 67 years old. I live at the end of Oakdale Road in Millbrook, Virginia. Population just under 4,000. I drive a 1994 Ford pickup, dark green with a dent in the passenger door from a deer that jumped out on Route 12 one November morning when the fog was thick enough to taste. I have a yellow Labrador named Biscuit who follows me room to room like he is afraid I might vanish if he blinks. Every morning, I wake at 5:15 without an alarm. 42 years of early shifts will do that to a man. I make coffee in a percolator that belonged to my father, the kind with the glass knob on top that lets you watch the water turn brown. I sit on the back porch if the weather is warm enough and listen to the Cardinals before the rest of the world wakes up. Most folks in Millbrook know me as the retired handyman. The man who fixed Clara Henderson's porch railing, the man who replaced the pipes under the church baptismal when nobody else wanted to crawl into that dark space. I never charge for most of it. People leave me preserves or cornbread on the step, and that is more than enough. What they do not know is that before I was the quiet man with the green truck and the yellow dog, I spent 23 years in military intelligence. I held a clearance level most people do not know exists. I briefed generals who changed the shape of maps, but that was another life. I came home from that life and married a woman named Grace and became the kind of man who fixes screen doors and talks to his dog like the dog might answer. Grace was the reason I came home. She was a school librarian with brown eyes that turned gold in the late afternoon and a laugh that came from somewhere deeper than her chest. She had a way of seeing through people that I never fully understood. She could meet someone for 5 minutes and know more about them than I would learn in a year of training. She used to say something that stayed with me long after she was gone. She would look at me over her glasses and say, "Robert, you learn everything you need to know about a person by watching what they do when they think nobody important is looking." I did not understand that when she first said it. It took me decades. It took losing her. Grace died 7 years ago, pancreatic cancer, the kind that does not give you time to argue. She went from a woman who shelved 200 books in an afternoon to a woman who could not hold a teacup steady in 4 months. I held her hand the last night. The room smelled like lavender because she hated the scent of hospital. Her last words were not dramatic. She squeezed my hand and said, "Make sure they eat something real for dinner, not just cereal." Then she closed her eyes. I sat there until the sun came up. I did not cry that night. I cried 3 days later, standing in the grocery store aisle, staring at a box of chamomile tea she used to drink every evening. A woman asked if I was all right, and I said yes, and walked out without buying a thing. The silence after Grace was the loudest thing I had ever known. Louder than any briefing room. I would make 2 cups of coffee and realize my mistake only when the second went cold. I reached across the bed one night in my sleep, and my hand found nothing, and that nothing woke me faster than any alarm. After Grace, the only thing that kept me upright was my daughter Sarah. My beautiful, stubborn, impossibly kind Sarah. She was 32 when her mother died. She drove 4 hours from Richmond every weekend for 6 months to sit with me. She did not try to fix me. She did not say everything happens for a reason. She just sat with me and brought soup and brushed biscuit and let the silence be what it was. Sarah teaches 5th grade at a public school in a part of Richmond that most people drive through on their way somewhere nicer. She makes $41,000 a year. She drives a car with 162,000 miles on it. She lives in a 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner, and the whole place smells like warm cotton and pressing steam and something faintly sweet from the detergent they use downstairs. books everywhere, stacked on the coffee table and lined up along the windowsill and piled on the nightstand next to her bed, student drawings on the refrigerator, a herb garden on the windowsill she tends like it is a living thing that matters. If this story is already making you feel something, I hope you will stay with me through what comes next. Subscribe to this channel so stories like this keep finding the people who need to hear them. Now let me tell you about my son. Daniel's 36. He lives in a high-rise in Charlotte, North Carolina, corporate finance. He makes more in a month than Sarah makes in a year. He drives a car that costs more than my house. And I want to be fair here. When Daniel was young, he was the kind of boy who caught fireflies in a jar and let them go because he said they looked sad behind the glass. He made his mother a birthday card every year with a drawing of the two of them holding hands. He was sweet. He loved Grace in that uncomplicated way children love before the world teaches them to keep score. Something changed in college. I do not know if it was the money or the distance from everything that kept him soft, but he came back different each time. The boy who freed fireflies started talking about leverage and return on investment, like those words were a language he was always meant to speak and ours was holding him back. Grace would have said, people grow into who they need to be. You do not choose the direction. So I watched. The way you watch weather building. Clouds darkening, but you cannot stop the storm. The first Thanksgiving, after Grace had been gone 4 years, Daniel arrived 2 hours late, carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than the entire meal. He set it on the counter and looked around the kitchen like a man surveying a hotel room he got by mistake. "Still this place," he said. Not hello, not sorry I'm late. Just still this place. I let it go. Sarah shot me a look across the kitchen and I nodded once and she went back to mashing potatoes. During dinner, Daniel described his new apartment. The skyline view, the gym on the 14th floor. Sarah listened without making him feel small for having more, but Daniel did not return the courtesy. "So what do you do again?" he said to Sarah, his tone light, casual. The way you ask someone at a party what they do when you already know the answer will not impress you. "I teach 5th grade, Sarah said. "Same school?" Daniel sipped his wine. "Right. Must be nice having summers off." I watched Sarah's hand tighten around her fork. Not much, just enough that I noticed because I have spent my life noticing what others miss. A gift and a curse from intelligence work. You see everything. You cannot unsee any of it. At Christmas, Daniel brought a woman named Victoria, who complimented my house the way you compliment a child's drawing. "Oh, it is so charming. Has it always been this small?" Daniel laughed. "Dad is a simple guy. Right, Dad?" He clapped me on the shoulder harder than necessary. Simple. That word sat in my chest like a splinter. A man with 23 years of classified service being called simple by his own son in his own kitchen. Grace's words came back. You learn everything you need to know about a person by watching what they do when they think nobody important is looking. That was the key. Daniel had decided I was nobody important, that Sarah was nobody important. But I held my tongue. I ate my dinner. I watched. There is a discipline to watching that most never learn. In the field, we called it passive collection. You do not react. You observe and file every detail away for when the moment requires it. That moment had not come yet, but it was approaching faster than any of us knew. Over the next 2 years, the small things accumulated like snow on a roof. Quiet, easy to ignore, building toward a crack. Daniel stopped calling Sundays. He forgot my birthday, twice. The second time he sent a late message with no punctuation. Sarah drove down both times. She brought a lopsided cake she baked herself and a handwritten letter 3 pages long about memories of Grace. I read it 4 times on the porch after she left. There was one evening I will never forget. Daniel's birthday dinner at a steakhouse in Charlotte. Halfway through, a young waiter named Thomas brought the wrong wine. Daniel snapped his fingers to call him over. Not a wave, a snap. Like calling a dog. "I ordered the $90 bottle," Daniel said. "Can you read?" Thomas went red from the collar up. Sarah put her napkin down. "He made a mistake," she said quietly. "It is fine." Daniel gave her a smile that was not a smile. Easy for you to say. You probably think $60 for wine is extravagant. Sarah said nothing. She put her napkin back in her lap and something behind her eyes went quiet. I recognized that look. The slow recognition that love does not always go both ways. That you can pour yourself into someone and they can look at you like a $60 bottle when they ordered the 90. I wanted to say something, but this was my son. You do not neutralize your son at his birthday dinner. You drive 3 hours home in the dark thinking about fireflies and when exactly he stopped letting them go. Here is where the story breaks. 2 years after that dinner, I started coughing, not a cold cough. The kind that wakes you at 3 in the morning and leaves a taste like rust. I ignored it for weeks because that is what men of my generation do. Sarah noticed during a visit. We were on the porch with fried chicken and biscuit between us, and I started coughing in a way I could not stop. She looked at me the way Grace used to when she knew I was lying about being fine. How long, she said. A couple weeks, I said. A lie? It had been 2 months. She made an appointment with Dr. Harris. The scans showed a mass on my left lung. He referred me to a specialist in Richmond. Dr. Annan told me it was operable but needed to happen within 3 weeks. Then the billing coordinator came in, a man named Paul with a clipboard and an expression that said he had delivered this news before. Your insurance has a gap, Paul said. The deposit required before we schedule the operating room is $3,500. I sat in my truck in that parking lot a long time. I did the math 6 ways. Every way came out the same. I did not have it. My savings held $800. My credit was still wrecked, and in Charlotte, my son had a portfolio worth more than small towns. I told myself I would not call. For 3 days, I held to that. Then I called because that is what fathers do. You put your pride in a drawer and you call your son and you hope. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Restaurant noise behind him, silverware on plates, a woman laughing. Dad, he said, can I call you back? We are in the middle of dinner. Daniel, I need to talk to you about something important. I heard him excuse himself. Then his voice, quieter, with impatience, running through it like a wire pulled tight. Okay, go. I told him everything. The mass, the surgery, the deposit. There was a silence long enough to hear my own heartbeat. Then his voice went flat. Dad, he said, I cannot keep doing this. You lost the property. You burned through savings. Now you want me to write a check every time something goes wrong? Daniel, this is surgery. This is not... I know what it is, he cut me off. But I have worked hard to get where I am. Ask the hospital for a payment plan. That is what they are for. Then quieter. I have my own life to protect, Dad. I cannot keep being dragged down by yours. He hung up. My son hung up while I sat in a truck outside a hospital with something growing in my chest. He hung up to go back to his dinner. The parking lot lights came on one by one, those sodium lamps that turn everything orange and make the world look like a photograph left in the sun. I did not cry. I had cried myself empty watching Grace disappear. I just sat with my hands on the wheel and felt something inside me go very still. The kind of still that comes before a decision. I did not call Sarah, but she called me Wednesday the way she always did. And she knew within 30 seconds. Dad, she said, what is going on? Tell me right now. I told her about the diagnosis, not about Daniel, just the surgery and the money. She was quiet for a long time. I could hear the dry cleaner's machines through her apartment floor. How much, she said. Sarah, no. How much, Dad? $3,500, I said, and I hated every syllable. She did not hesitate, not 1 second. She did not mention payment plans. She did not say she had her own life to protect. I will be there Saturday, she said. Do not argue with me. She showed up carrying a grocery bag and an envelope. Chicken soup, she said. Grace's recipe. Too much dill. Then she set the envelope on the table and slid it toward me. Inside was a cashier's check for $3,500. Sarah, I said. My voice broke on her name. Where did you... I sold the car, she said, quietly, like she was mentioning a new brand of coffee. Not like she had sold her only transportation to save her father. It had 162,000 miles, Dad. It was going to die on me anyway. I got 2,000, and I took out a loan for the rest. She grabbed my hand across the table. The way you grab something precious. Cars can be replaced, she said. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady as oak. You cannot. I wept in that kitchen. I wept the way I had not wept since Grace, for my daughter riding a bus at 6:30 in the morning so I could get on an operating table, for my son ordering $100 dinners while his father sat doing math that never worked, for Grace, who would have known what to say and was not here to say it. Sarah held my hand through all of it. When I got quiet, she said, "Dad, you taught me what matters. People are not investments. You do not calculate the return before you love them." Before I go any further, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what city you are watching from right now. I read every single one of them, and knowing you are out there listening keeps these stories alive. It keeps me telling them. I had no idea, sitting there, how much that moment was about to matter. The surgery was a Thursday in November. Sarah drove down the night before. Last thing I remember was her face close to mine, hands squeezing my fingers. "You're going to be fine, old man," she said. "I told the surgeon you are the most stubborn person in Virginia." I went under. Woke 7 hours later with fire in my chest. Dr. Ainen came by in her scrubs. "Clean margins, Robert," she said. "The mass is out." I closed my eyes and saw Grace. Not the Grace who was sick. The Grace who danced in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. I recovered at Sarah's apartment. 3 weeks on a pull-out couch, 2 inches too short with a spring in my lower back. The dry cleaner's machines hum below at 6 every morning. Sarah taped my medication schedule to the refrigerator next to her bus schedule. Her new bus schedule. She left at 6:20 every morning. I would lie on that couch listening to her move through the dark kitchen. Coffee, lunch, coat, the door opening and closing. Footsteps on the stairs. Then nothing. And I would think of my daughter at a bus stop in November cold while Daniel slept in a bed that cost more than her apartment. She never complained. She came home smelling like whiteboard markers and cafeteria food. Checked my incision, heated soup, grated papers at the kitchen table while I dozed. Sometimes I woke to a blanket over me that had not been there before. During the second week, the letter arrived, 2 envelopes requiring a signature. The first from the Department of Defense Veterans Affairs Division, a claim I had filed 8 years earlier for service-connected health issues, denied twice, given up on. The letter said it had been reviewed under a new directive, approved, full retroactive compensation, $427,000, monthly payments going forward, full medical coverage. The second letter was from a law firm called Bennett and Grayson. A defense contractor had used my classified work in a commercial application without authorization. Class action settlement. My share was $1.8 million. I set both letters on Sarah's kitchen table next to her bus schedule and her Apple magnet and sat very still. The apartment hummed, and I thought about $3,500, about my daughter selling her car, about my son going back to his steak, about Grace saying you learn everything you need to know about a person by watching what they do when they think nobody important is looking. I knew exactly what I would do. I called Martin Cross, my closest friend from service, the only person in Millbrook who knew my real background. We met at the diner on Route 7. I set both letters between our coffees. He read them slowly. "Well," he said, "that is something." "I need your help," I said, "the kind that requires patience and discretion." Over the next 3 weeks, Martin drove me to appointments. I met with a financial advisor named Helen Chen who specialized in veterans benefits. Helen set up an irrevocable trust in Sarah's name. Everything. The retroactive payment. The settlement. The ongoing compensation, all structured to be legally untouchable. She asked if I was sure. I told her about the car, the bus schedule, the loan. She nodded and drew up the paperwork. During all of this, Daniel did not call once. 4 weeks. Not to ask about surgery, not to ask if I was alive. Grace's words. What they do when they think nobody important is looking. Then one Sunday, Daniel called Sarah. I heard her voice through the thin wall. I heard her say he was in the hospital. "Daniel, where were you?" She came back with her face tight. "He heard from a cousin that you had surgery," she said. "Did he ask how I am?" I asked. Her eyes gave the answer before her mouth. "No, Dad. He asked if you had updated your will." Something inside me went perfectly still, beyond calm. The place where emotion stops and clarity takes over. 3 weeks later, Daniel showed up at Sarah's door. No warning, hard knock at 7:30 on a Wednesday. Suit jacket. Behind him, a woman he introduced as Patricia, his financial advisor. Leather briefcase. A smile that did not reach her eyes. "We need to talk," he said. He walked in without invitation. He saw me on the couch and something crossed his face that might have been guilt. "Dad," he said, "you look." He did not finish. "I have been better," I said. Daniel sat at Sarah's table. Patricia opened her briefcase. "Dad," he said, "we need to discuss the future. Your assets. What happens if—" He stopped, but I heard the word he swallowed. When. He was past the possibility of my survival and into the logistics of my death. I let the silence work. Patricia began explaining estate planning the way people talk to someone they have decided is not bright, slowly, with small words. She was still talking when Sarah walked in from the kitchen with damp hands and rolled sleeves. She looked at Patricia. "Then Daniel, then me. What is going on?" she said. Not a question. A line drawn in the air. Daniel leaned forward. "Sis, Patricia is helping sort out Dad's estate." "Oh," Sarah said, "that particular quiet." "Grace's quiet. You are sorting out his estate?" "While he recovers from cancer on my couch. While I ride a bus because I sold my car for his surgery." "That is what you came for." I held up my hand. "Daniel," I said, "Patricia, I need to show you something." I reached under the cushion where I had kept the documents for 2 weeks, waiting. The way a man waits when he knows weather is about to break. I set 3 documents on the table. The VA letter, the settlement letter, the trust. I slid the first 2 toward Daniel. "Read those," I said. I watched his eyes move across the page, watched the color in his face change. 400, he started. He picked up the second letter. 1.8, he whispered. Patricia leaned over and her composure cracked. Then I slid the trust across. "That is irrevocable," I said. "Every dollar from both letters, every asset connected to my service, held in trust, the sole beneficiary is Sarah." He looked up. Confusion, anger, fear, and underneath, buried deep where he probably did not know it lived, shame. "You gave it all to her? Everything?" "Daniel," I said, 3 months ago, I called you from a hospital parking lot. I told you I had cancer. I needed $3,500. You told me you could not keep being dragged down by my life. Then you hung up and went back to dinner. Your sister, who makes $41,000 a year, sold her car, took a loan at 22%, emptied her account to $11. She did that so I could live. Then she gave me her couch and rode a bus for 3 months in the cold. I looked at Patricia. "You can close your briefcase. The trust cannot be changed, cannot be challenged. Every dollar goes to the person who showed up." Daniel stood. "Dad, you cannot. This is not." "Not what?" I said. "Not fair?" "Let me tell you about Fair. Fair is a teacher selling her car while her brother orders steaks. Fair is a daughter who never asked about my will because she was too busy keeping me alive. Fair happened in a diner when your sister slid an envelope across the table and said, 'Cars can be replaced and you cannot.' You were not there. You chose that. Choices have consequences." Daniel's face came apart in stages. First, the anger left, then the arrogance, then the control. What remained was something I had not seen since he was 12 and got caught lying about breaking a window. Patricia closed her briefcase and left. In the quiet, Daniel put his face in his hands. For a long time, nobody spoke. "Dad," he said, "I am sorry." I looked at the top of his head. His hair was thinning at the crown. He had not noticed. I noticed everything. "Sorry is a start," I said. "But not enough. Not yet. It might never be. But it is a start." He looked up. "When did you become?" He could not find the word. "When did I become someone worth listening to?" "I have always been that person, Daniel." You stopped looking. Grace's words one final time. "You learn everything you need to know about a person by watching what they do when they think nobody important is looking. Your sister saw me. She decided I was worth sacrificing for. You decided I was not. That is not something money fixes. That is something time and humility might begin to repair." He left without another word. At the door, he looked back at Sarah. His mouth opened, but nothing came. The apartment went quiet. Sarah sat beside me on the couch. She did not speak for a long time. We just sat there above the dry cleaner with the neighbor's television through the ceiling and Biscuit asleep on the rug. "Dad," she said, "you did not have to give me all of it." "Yes, I did," I said. She leaned her head on my shoulder, careful of my ribs, and we sat like that while the evening settled around us. Months passed. Winter turned to spring. Sarah paid off her loans. She bought a modest house on a quiet street with a yard big enough for a garden. She started a tutoring program for kids whose families could not afford help. She bought a reliable car, nothing flashy. She kept teaching. That meant the most. She walked into that classroom every morning like those fifth graders were the most important people alive, because to her, they were. I went home to Millbrook, fixed Clara Henderson's fence, joined a veterans breakfast group at the diner, 8 men around a table telling stories they could not tell anyone else. Biscuit came to the community center on Thursdays where children petted him and pulled his ears, and he bore it with the dignity of a dog who knows his job is to be soft in a hard world. Daniel called Sarah in April. He did not ask about the trust. He asked about her students, her garden, whether Dad was okay. A short call, awkward, full of pauses. But it was a call. He called the next week, too. Sent a birthday card with a handwritten note. 3 lines, not grand, but his handwriting and his words, and that was more than a late text with no punctuation. I do not know if Daniel will ever fully understand what he chose, but the door is not locked. It is closed, but not locked. There is a difference. When I was young, I thought strength meant what you could endure, how much you could carry before your arms gave out. War taught me strength was what you were willing to sacrifice so someone else could keep going. But aging, losing grace, watching my daughter sell her car and ride a bus in the cold so I could live, that taught me the real truth. Strength is not what you carry. It is not what you sacrifice. Strength is what you give when you have almost nothing left. Strength is $11 in a bank account and an envelope on a diner table. Strength is a bus schedule on a refrigerator. Strength is a daughter who never asked to be paid back because she never thought of it as a debt. That is the strongest thing I have seen in 67 years. Stronger than anything in 23 years of service. A woman with damp hands and a hole in her sweater, sliding an envelope across a table and saying cars can be replaced and you cannot. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone who showed up when it mattered, someone who gave when they had almost nothing, share it with them. Share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet love is the loudest kind. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this, and leave a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest. Tell me about the person in your life who would sell their car for you without thinking twice. Sometimes the people who need these words most find them through you.